We're going to start today's show with the damage at the U.S. Embassy in Oslo, which is still being investigated. Thankfully, no one was hurt as embassies and other U.S. offices overseas are on high alert. Let's talk more with Black Hawk helicopter pilot and battalion commander and retired lieutenant colonel of the U.S. Army, Darren Gobb. Also providing insight is executive director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, Asaf Romirowsky. Asaf, to you first. What do you make of this incident in Oslo, and how should the U.S. handle it?
Well, good morning, and thanks for having me. I think that what we're seeing around the world is how the war with Iran is reverberating, and of course there is a concern that I've had also here back at home is, of course, the rise of homegrown terrorism, what we saw in Texas at the beginning of last week. So all U.S. targets and really all U.S. assets around the world are indeed on high alert. That's exactly why we're sending individuals home. And so I think that that's also what's reverberating, especially in Europe, where you have a larger Muslim population. It is being basically used as fertile ground to basically amplify what's happening in the region. And that's something I think we're going to be seeing more and more around the world and even here at home as the war continues.
Darren, let's stay in Europe right now. The president isn't really pulling any punches against the United Kingdom, and Prime Minister Keir Starmer saying on Truth Social that we don't need help from people for a war that we've already won. So why wouldn't Trump want any more help from a key U.S. ally? What's the status of our alliance, our relationship? This is always known as the special relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. Is it at a low point right now? And how does Keir Starmer get back in the good graces of President Trump? One of his predecessors, Tony Blair, was quoted as saying, and I'm paraphrasing, that, when the U.S. asks you to do something in this alliance, you show up. Starmer didn't do that, did he?
No, and it wasn't a surprise at all that he didn't show up, or at least he's attempting to show up a little late in the game. That special relationship, it's been under some stress lately, partly because of the massive influx of Muslim immigration into the UK, and I'm sure Keir Starmer is a little worried about his public support now of what the US is doing in Iran and the people in London. And I have a veterans coalition across many nations in Europe and Americas and South Pacific, and the message is the same everywhere you talk to these folks. It's that this mass unchecked immigration / invasion of people into these different European countries is making them look a lot more Islamic than they are Western European per se, and the violence they're perpetrating is frequent. This could happen here too. So I think Keir Starmer is worried about a little bit of reaction and blowback on that, but he also knows that in order to maintain the influence the UK has always had with the US and in the Middle East, that he's got to at least appear to be looking to support what we're doing and potentially make movements in our direction.
Yeah, the point of contention was essentially the UK was very slow to approve the use of some of their bases in the region for our jets, for our planes to refuel for all of these bombing missions still going on there over the skies of Iran. Though, Asaf, another aspect of this war going on in the conflict is this bombing that killed roughly 165 Iranians, mostly young children, at a school. Now, the cause is still being investigated. The Trump administration, though, suggesting the Iran regime was behind it. Trump was asked on Air Force One about it. Listen.
Based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Nixon? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Still investigating?
But the only side that targets civilians is Iran. We think it was done by Iran. Because they're very inaccurate, as you know, with their munitions. They have no accuracy whatsoever. It was done by Iran.
So obviously the terrible cost of war here. How does the United States go about these investigations when something like this happens? And do you believe President Trump in his assertion that he believes it was Iran, not the United States?
So let's put it into context. Islamist groups, as we've also seen over the past 2.5 years, also with the war with Gaza, which has been part of the multi-front war with Iran, it's very typical to use civilian schools, infirmaries, and other kind of things in order to create the mass casualties. And that's part of the propaganda that plays out. Unfortunately, this is a cost of war, and there are indeed real casualties. But I too am skeptical as far as how this all played out. And I think that this is also part of the narrative to create in order to depict the United States in a certain lens in order to create the hatred and the animosity. And that's all part of the theater. That's part of it. Again, there are real casualties. There are problems that play out here, but we have also to consider the goals and objectives of these groups, and especially groups like Iran, who know exactly how the sympathy has worked out with the war with Gaza. And if they can depict that happen, then of course they can create animosity towards the United States and try to put pressure as far as stopping the war. That's all part of the trying to contextualize all of this. But again, I think that this is something that it does happen as a result of war, and that's part of the collateral damage, unfortunately. But I'm not dismissing anything the use of kids and civilians and whatnot. That's one of the main differences, by the way, between the U.S. and Israel and others, that distinguishing between combatants and non-combatants, whereas the Islamist groups don't.
Darren, I want to go back to something that President Trump has mentioned in the past, but also reinforced yesterday on Air Force One, and that is that he wants to be involved in the election for a new Iranian leader. He highlighted the long-term importance of it. Let's take a listen.
Well, because I don't want to just come back every 10 years, and mostly you'll have presidents, that won't do that because they don't get it. But we don't want to come back every 5 years or every 10 years and do this. So we want to pick a president that's not going to be leading their country into a war.
Talk to us about how crucial it will be for the world on who leads Iran next.
Extraordinarily crucial, and I'd say that's the greatest risk of this entire mission is how to win the peace that comes afterwards, assuming you have a military victory in the first place, which clearly it looks like that's the greater odds of that happening than not. But ultimately, this comes down to the Iranian people need to pick their own leaders. We can't install something or try to affect their elections in such a way as that looks like what America did in Ukraine in 2014 in the Maidan Revolution era. When we're over meddling and getting over involved in people's selection of what they want for a leadership. But we do want to, or we should want to have a role in helping this process along to make sure it does go as right as possible to give them the greatest chance of electing somebody, or however that process works, to find a leader who cares about the people of Iran, who wants to be a good neighbor to the people of the Middle East and Central Asia, and frankly, the rest of the world. That would be healthy for everybody.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb and Asaf Romirowsky, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.